Dear colleagues, first years, geachte collega's eerstejaars, a warm welcome to you all. It's great to be with you. I'm Professor Johnny Hay from the Faculty of Education, Fakulteit Opvoedkunde en een van die 5 skole. One of the 5 schools of the faculty is called the School of Psychosocial Education, and I'm the director for that specific school. The other schools I'm sure you'll come to know with time: School of Languages in Education, School of Maths, Science, Technology in Education, School of Professional Studies in Education, and also the School of Social Science and Commerce. But for this morning's talk, we are with the School of Psychosocial Education, and I'm specifically an educational and clinical psychologist and also an educator, of course. Warm welcome to you all. Baie welkom vir julle almal. This morning we are speaking about a very interesting topic. I'm sure it may interest you quite a bit. It's coping with stress while studying at university. Hoe hanteer ek stres terwyl ek by die universiteit aan die studeer is? Just to start off with, I think you will see there at the top, our famous president Nelson Mandela said that education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world. I think that saying of him is very, very familiar to all of you. And I want to welcome you again then to higher education. Colleagues, this is now called higher education. If you are at a university like the Northwest University, you are into higher education. You completed your grade 12 in further education and training, and this sector is not any longer called tertiary education, but now higher education. So a warm welcome to you again, and we are dealing with this interesting topic, which is close to my heart: coping with stress while studying at university. I remember very vividly, although I may be 3 times older than you are, my first day at university when I got to the hostel. I remember that very, very vividly, and I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic experience to you also as we go along. Right, colleagues, I want to start with a question, 'n vraag dan aan julle. Is university stressful at all? Is dit enigstens stressvol op universiteit? Is university stressful at all? Colleagues, I would have loved to hear your views. What do you think? Is university stressful at all? Unfortunately, we are not in a physical space now that I can get your responses, but it would have been very, very interesting to hear what you say. Why do we ask the question? Because there are so many good and exciting things about university. Fantastiese, opwindende dinge oor universiteit. So many good things. So why do we even ask the question, is university stressful at all? Unfortunately, we also have a lot of scary stories. Stories wat bang maak. Scary stories, colleagues. I'm sure you've heard a number of scary stories also. If we say something about the good and exciting things, I'm sure you've heard the rumors that university, the time at Northwest University will be the best time of your life. I'm sure you've heard that. If you've had parents that also had the privilege to study, you may have heard that this is the best time of your life. Okay, that's one of the big and exciting things I think that you have heard. Some of the scary stories I think that you may have heard, I think in the first place must have been the seniors are not too friendly. Okay, I remember very, very clearly when I got to the hostel. How many years ago is that now? Okay, I must just think very clearly. It's about 41 years ago when I got to the hostel. Colleagues, that was the biggest scare from my side. And you know, I've been in the Defence Force then for 2 years, but even then starting anew at a hostel, you thought and you heard about the seniors that are not very friendly. Okay, things have changed a little bit now, and I think we'll say something about that a bit later. But one of the other scary stories that you may have heard is that people just drop out. Students just drop out of university. First year students just drop you out of university after a few months or after a year and say, no, look, let me rather go try to work. I can't make this. I won't make this. Okay, but let me share with you my list of exciting and scary issues. And before I get to that, you'll see there at the top right, the Northwest University was ranked last year by the World University Ranking System. In South Africa, ranked as 5th. So really, it's great to have you around, and dankie dat julle die NWU gekies het. 5 out of 26 universities in the country. That's not too bad, to be 5th. Colleagues, the list of my exciting issues about university. The first thing I think is it's the best time of your life, as we said already. And why is it probably the best time of your life? Because you have so much freedom. Colleagues, yes, I think if you speak of freedom, you'll know that you may have been fenced in quite a bit in your home at the moment. Parents, other adults, teachers, looking over your shoulder, etc., etc. It can be called the best time of your life. You're young, you've got lots of energy, you've got lots of passion. Life is open in front of you, lies ahead. And you know, everything else usually works well. You have health, no serious health issues probably. So fantastic time of your life. And just to reiterate, once you're in higher education and you've been accepted now into your Northwest University, you are part of only 18% of matriculates that have this type of privilege. Only 18%, so less than or fewer than 1 out of 5 you are really privileged to be with us for this best time of your life then. Colleagues, the second exciting issue is that we don't often accentuate enough and emphasize, is that you are focusing on your real interests. At school, you may have had a little bit of a choice to do this or that, but if you look at university, the choices are just massive, what you can study. The subject choices, school is nothing compared to what you can do at university in terms of your real interests. So that's the fantastic part. Life lies open in front of you and you've got all these choices. In my school, you could study to become an educational psychologist eventually. You could become a learner support educator. You could become a life orientation teacher. You could become a physical ed teacher. You could become an early childhood specialist. Colleagues, these things I'm sure you've had very, very little of at school, except perhaps life orientation that you are familiar with. But the rest, colleagues, are all new fields, and it's the wonderful part that you can focus on something that you are really, really interested in. And that makes studying so much easier. That's the good news. At school, you were forced in many instances, but now you have the option to really delve deep into what you really would like to do for the rest of your life. The third exciting thing that I want to mention is that you don't jump directly into the world of work or even no work. You've seen the stats the other day and heard about the 32% that we're on a new record high of unemployment in the country. Formal figure, if we look at the informal figure, it's in the 40s somewhere. So the nice part is, colleagues, you've got a transitional period where you don't get into work directly. You've got some time to prepare yourself to work one day, whether it be 4 years for a B.Ed, whether you're going to study an honours after that, 5 years, etc. So you've got some transitional time to really get yourself ready for the world of work. Colleagues, yes, I think some of you may know the 40-40-40 principle that they often speak about. you don't have to jump into that directly. 40 years of work, 40 hours per week, and to work for 40% of your final salary as your pension, colleagues. The nice part is you don't have to jump into that directly. You have some time to prepare yourself for the world of work. And the last thing that I just want to mention, I'm sure you can mention a number of other things also in terms of what you are looking forward to. But that is that here you can really do things that you like. You can socialize with friends that you like. I think one should say to each other that at university you get friends that think very similar to you. I know of a family member, for example, who was at a very small rural school and didn't find friends that she could really relate to. So here you have friends that are all studying, let's say, education in your instance, or all studying foundation phase, or senior phase, even studying the same subjects are you doing, let's say, at senior FET level. And you will find that, if we look at career theory, it states very clearly that you make friends with people that are studying in your direction. And you tend to have similar characteristics. That is lovely to then join. In Afrikaans, we use the word geesgenoot. It's people that are thinking very much similar and have the same type of interest than you have. Other interesting things to do what you like is interesting associations that you can join at university. Things that you may not have heard about even. Lovely sport opportunities to take part in. So such a wonderful array of things that you can really focus anew and for the rest of your life what you would like to really get into. Colleagues, but if we get to the scary part, the bangmaak kant of university, what have you heard? It may have been interesting. We spoke about the seniors. I would like to list one of the serious issues is that the first year dropout figure is high. We mustn't underestimate it. I'm not here to scare you this morning, but we must be aware of these kind of things. The first year dropout rate is unfortunately very high, and it stands 40% plus. Colleagues, so about 2 out of 5 of you may not see the end of the year in terms of completing your first year, which is not a very good figure to look at. The pass rate of the first years is also a challenge. The pass rate. So first years often suffer to really pass well. And colleagues, yes, I think one must say to each other that a good matric is not necessarily a ticket to have a good pass at first year at university, but we'll get to that in a bit more detail. Thirdly, I would say that higher education represents a massive change from school. And this is a huge issue, colleagues. You must be very clear about this. A number of issues here. The volume of work is so much higher. I think you may have heard this scary story. The speed with which you are learning must increase exponentially. You have freedom that you didn't have previously. You can decide for yourself. You may have some rules in hostel or res and at your private accommodation, but it's very, very few compared to where you come from now, with adult supervision. Now you have very little supervision, it's over to you. And that is part of why the first year dropout rate is often so high. Students battle to make this transition in terms of the freedom that is now all of a sudden in front of you. Colleagues, now just a tip in terms of adjustment to higher education and this huge change. Gone are the days of saying sir, madam, or teacher. Colleagues, we are not a glorified school at university. Please, you must make that transition as soon as you can. Now you have professors, you have doctors, you have a dean of the Faculty of Education, who is the leader of the faculty. You have a vice-chancellor, Professor Dan Gwadi, who is our leader at the university. So a tip from my side, please don't call people sir, teacher, ma'am anymore. Rather start at the top. You can rather say professor whoever, and then the person will correct you and say, no, I'm a doctor. Because this is a cause of irritation, serious irritation, colleagues, for many, many lecturers. And this will not help your stress if you get into this type of issue with your lecturers. If you consistently, after a person has studied very, very long to get to a doctorate, if you consistently call the person teacher or ma'am or Tani or whatever, that is not on at higher education level. Colleagues, the next issue about scary things is it is an adjustment. You can do what you want, you have to adjust. It's a new environment, and in psychology we always speak about the new adjustment. What is adjustment all about? Often it takes about 2 years. Psychology would say 2 years to really adjust to a new environment. So you've been settled, you've been in your comfort zone now for 5 years at high school. You can remember very clearly, I think, coming to high school in grade 8 after grade 7 when you were settled in your comfort zone at primary school. Now you get to high school, grade 8, and it's totally a new environment. And the same, colleagues, with university. You are adjusting now. So it may take up to 2 years for you to adjust to this new environment, when you really can say, look, now I'm settled, everything feels fine and in place and so on. So take that into account, that you are adjusting. Some, if you're lucky, you may adjust within a year. You know, that's wonderful. But so your first year is really an adjustment period to get used to all the new inputs, all the new stimuli that will come your way. Colleagues, the bad news, the scary part of this adjustment again, is that 47% of students will drop out of higher education. That's close to 1 out of 2, colleagues. So take that into account. Don't let it scare you, but please rather let it motivate you that you are not one of those 2 that are dropping out of higher education. And if we add distance education, it climbs to an astounding 68% of students who drop out of higher education. Colleagues, I'm sure that's not what you intend to do. You know, it's like marriage. When you marry your loved one, your intention is not to divorce one day, hey? And surely you also stand at the beginning of a new dawn for your life. And it's not your intention to drop out, but you need to be prepared as well as possible for this new environment to get into that. Colleagues, and yes, I mentioned already, and I think that's my last scary story, seniors that are not too friendly. Fortunately, things have changed very, very much. You know, the old days, 41 years ago, seniors could just about do what they want to the first years. That has changed dramatically in terms of human rights, our new dispensation since 94, etc. So many seniors will be very welcoming to you. And that's a good part of being a first year at the moment. The downside of that is that you may think initially that you have arrived, colleagues, and that just be careful for that, because you are not senior at university. You start afresh, you need to adjust, and within 3 or 4 years you'll also be senior. And please don't get the idea that, you know, you can throw your weight around at this new environment, because it's a tough and it's a challenging environment if you think too much of your capabilities. Colleagues, so I come back to my question. Is university stressful at all? Is universiteit stressvol of nie? Ek sou baie graag weer wou gehoor het wat u sê. I would have loved to hear what you would have responded to this. But I must tell you, yes, in most cases, unfortunately, it is a stressful environment as a first year. Because of which factors? The first one I want to say again is adjustment. I think we've spoken at length about that now. You are adjusting. It's a total new environment. It's a voluntary environment. It's a persuasive environment. Seniors will tell you, and your parents who had the privilege to study perhaps, would have told you, look, I am bunking the 8 o'clock class. You know, in many instances I just sleep on because I've partied late last night. So it's your choice to attend the class. And now with COVID, it's much more unstructured even. You know, you don't even have physical classes perhaps on the campus that's running. You have to, in your own time now, study online because, you know, the specific classes are not there. So a huge adjustment, and that makes it a bit vague and may make it quite stressful. I wonder if there's one of you listening this morning who does not have the question, will I make it? I think that's one of the big issues when you get into a new environment. Will I make it in this environment? All of us ask that, colleagues, and it's a good question because it motivates us. As I said, a good matric is not necessarily a guarantee that you'll make it at higher education level. There we said to each other that 47% may drop out during the course of, you know, your study. So clearly, a good matric is not a guarantee that you'll make it. You'll have to make it work. What is much more of a guarantee is that if you've learned how to work persistently and seriously at high school level, that's a much better predictor for success at higher education level. Colleagues, yes, I think we've spoken about the transition, about a structured environment to a more unstructured environment. And in this instance now with COVID around, it's even more unstructured. It's so much over to you now to, with self-discipline, get your things and your act together to study in a self-directed, in a self-disciplined way. Another question that I think all of us will be asking, at the moment, many of you may be very sure about whether I'm studying the correct program, qualification. Colleagues, but within a few months, you may get to this question. Am I studying the correct program? Is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? That's a very, very natural outflow when starting with university. Very few of us, you know, never get to this question. In my instance, for example, I studied something and after 3 years I changed course slightly. I didn't totally start over again, but I changed course. So that is quite an issue that happened to just about all of us. Another question, colleagues, I think one of the other reasons why university is stressful is, will my finances make it? And you've heard the challenges with NSFAS, for example, currently. So will NSFAS pay out? Will my parents be able to pay for me? Will they be able to sustainably pay for me? Will I get some loans or bursary or whatever? Or in some rare instances, colleagues, you are paying for yourself. How will I make it work? So this is constantly an issue, I think, and it's not only about class fees and hostel and accommodation, but it's also about spending money. Can I live, you know, over and above the basic issues that need to be done? And as I said, colleagues, I think a serious issue at the moment is COVID-19. Why is it such a serious matter currently? It's because we have very little contact, social contact. And university, a big part of university is the social contact that you have with other students of your age, of your program, of your interests, etc. So that is going to be quite a challenge for you until our country normalizes and our world normalizes again. And the online learning, as we said, requires much more self-discipline than having lecturers standing in front of a class in a specific venue. Colleagues, I've said a lot, but let's just say something quickly about the emotional challenges of first years from research. And I must watch the time. This you will see all through. You into a world of research now, colleagues, higher education, a world of research. So although this source is somewhat dated, it is called a seminal source. It's an authoritative source. Very few people have got to this level of research in terms of what students experience emotionally is at a higher education level. One of the first vectors, Chickering and Reiser call it vectors, is that you should get right at your first year level, second year level, is developing competence. As we said, you often ask, will I make it? So I need to develop competence. After a year, can I start to think, yes, I think I may make it. I can do this. Managing emotions. They say that your first year is really up and down. It's very up and down. It's fluctuating seriously. So you need to start to learn how to manage your emotions from a high point to a very low point. To make it somewhat more, phlegmatic is the word we use in psychology. To not have these peaks and valleys of your emotions. And that's quite a challenge in your first year. You may experience that. Moving through autonomy to interdependence. So you may come here with a lot of bravado and think that I am fine, I'm okay, I'm autonomous, I made it well. But colleagues, one of the crucial issues is that you need to get to interdependence. At university, we are interdependent of each other. You are interdependent, of your lecturers, for example. You are also interdependent with your fellow students. So we must get that interdependence correct and right. Not think that I'm going to do my own thing, just be totally autonomous. That's not the way to go at university level, because we need each other. All the systems of the university need each other to succeed eventually. Developing mature interpersonal relationships. That's also crucial. Let me get to mature relationships. No childish way of interacting anymore with fellow students, colleagues. You are getting into adulthood. We call it early adulthood at the moment. So you need to develop your interpersonal relationships on an adult type of way. Colleagues, then establishing identity. You may think that you have established your identity by the age of 18 already, but eventually your early adulthood, this period, your early 20s, mid to mid 20s, colleagues, is still part of establishing your identity, especially if you're studying at a university level. Then that still helps to develop your identity. Who am I? Where do I want to go to? What type of partner do I want for life? Etc., etc. Developing purpose. You may think that you have a lot of purpose at the moment, but once you get into this new world, it may be that you develop some new purpose. Where am I heading to eventually? Developing integrity, a crucial part according to Chickering and Reiser. Will I plagiarize, with fellow students? Just take sources and don't use reference them. Will I just copy and paste from the internet when I do an assignment? No, eventually I want to develop integrity, because that is part and parcel of a professional life, to have integrity as well as possible. Colleagues, and I'm rushing, some indicators of being stressed. When should you become worried that you are stressed? When you are struggling with concentration, that's one of the first issues. If you cannot concentrate, colleagues, it may be an indicator that you are stressed. Okay, you may be worrying more than usual. Colleagues, worrying is an issue I think that we can speak about very, very long. Yes, I think we all worry to a certain extent, but the moment it gets too much, then you must become slightly concerned or somewhat concerned. If you experience tension in your body, stress goes and sits in a part of your body usually. Colleagues, it's very seldom that you don't experience stress within your body. So it may be a stiff neck, it may be butterflies in your tummy, it may be your muscles that contract or go into a spasm or whatever. These are all signs of stress that you are experiencing. Another one is that you can't switch off. Tonight when I want to go to sleep, I really can't switch off. My mind just keeps on running and rolling about what happened during the day. Now, all of us experience that. We may have a stressful day once in a week or so, but once this gets a pattern, then we must start to become slightly concerned. If your sleep and appetite, if those are affected, that's a clear sign of stress. And it may also be a sign of depression, but we're not dealing with depression today. But sleep may be too much sleep, it may be too little sleep. Appetite the same, it may be you want to eat too much or eat too little eventually. You may be more short-tempered than usual. You snap quickly. Colleagues, that's a huge sign of being under stress. I mean, if we speak about something like post-traumatic stress disorder, this is one of the first signs. So even in stress, that may be an issue. You may feel confused and undecided. That's also an indication of being under too much stress. More nightmares than usual. Dreaming too much, that may be an issue. Colleagues, all of us feel stressed at times. I think especially when we are adjusting. So be aware of this. There may be times of stress during this first year. But the problem is when it continues over a long period, colleagues, then it may become a serious challenge. It can then turn into an anxiety or a depressive disorder, and we don't have time to look at all the different anxiety disorders, but those are quite interesting. Things like generalized anxiety disorder, things like phobias, you start to become very fearful of certain issues, or even obsessive compulsive disorder, that's also an anxiety disorder. You start to do things over and over again as you cannot get closure. So how can we try to cope? I think that's where I want to really land with. Coping with the stress of university. And I have, I think, about 10 issues that I just quickly want to run through. How should we try to cope with the stress of our first year then? Be realistic. I think I mentioned this a number of times. You are adjusting in your first year. You must know that it will take time. You may have stressful periods during this time, but the big thing is it must not be a persistent kind of stress that you experience. Take note that adjustment is often equal to a stressful time. Know that mastering those 7 emotional challenges that I mentioned will need patience and time. You're not going to master them immediately, colleagues. Your emotions may be up and down for a few months of the year. That's quite normal. It will take time to get used to this new environment. It's okay to doubt your program. Colleagues, all of us, just about all of us went through that. But what I've said for my kids, for example, what I told them from the start, before they started to study, please work it in this way that you don't change more than once. It's fine to change your studies once, your program once, I would say. But once you get into twice, it becomes a problem. Once is not too bad, and you will see that many students change slightly their first, from their first way of program of study. But the fortunate part in education is that you may slightly change your direction. You may move from foundation phase to intermediate phase, for example. Or you may decide, look, I'm going to complete my senior FET phase B.Ed, and then I'd rather move into, let's say, an honours in learner support, something like that. So that's the nice part, colleagues. You may just adjust your direction slightly within all the number of qualifications that we have. Get into a routine as soon as possible. Routine is always good, colleagues, to handle stress. This supports competence, it supports a feeling of safety. If we look at small babies, what's the first advice that people would give new parents? Is get your child into a routine. That brings safety and security to the child. And the same with you. Although you're 18 or 19 or 20 now, the routine will bring some safety and predictability. Teach yourself to focus on crucial issues in the study material. Colleagues, that's another one that I could speak about very long. You're going to have this mass of information to digest. But now you need to really start to learn how to focus on the most crucial issues. You cannot impossibly learn everything, that's thrown at you at university. You must really start to learn to focus on the most crucial issues. Sure, this is one of my hobbies, to talk to yourself about irrational thoughts. Colleagues, there are many theories, we call it cognitive therapy, that's all about irrational thoughts. And it's a fantastic way of handling your stress if you can change your way of thinking about a number of things. And often stress comes because of irrational ways of thinking, that we're not thinking in a realistic way. Colleagues, but one day perhaps we could speak a bit more about that. Tackle challenges like you would eat an elephant. How is that? Step by step, small bits by small bits. That is how you would eat an elephant eventually. So it may be overwhelming initially, everything that's thrown at you at university. But then just get moving, as they say. Just do one thing after the other to get across the line eventually. Slow and simple steps, one by one. Don't be afraid to look for help if you get stuck. From your lecturers, from whoever. There's a whole center for teaching and learning that we have. If you get stuck academically, colleagues, you have so many ways to get help within the university environment. And please acquaint yourself with all those ways in which you can get help. I'm nearly through, but keep up every day. I can't emphasize that enough. If you get behind, you are in trouble. And that causes a lot of stress. I think from school days you'll remember that also. Here it's even more crucial to keep up every day. What you've done in class today, please go through it. Make sure that you're on top of that. Don't think you're going to look at that over the weekend, colleagues, because then other things have come in already, or you've had another day of class already. New study material, etc. thrown at you. Eventually, I think we need to work towards balance. And that's one of my things that I'd really like to preach about. Colleagues, balance, that's the art of life between academy, socializing, physical activity, cultural activity. That's eventually, I think, where we want to be. We want to live balanced lives. And a person who lives a balanced life is not stressful. So you can handle many things if you're not focusing only on one domain of your life. A last thing that I want to say about how do you handle stress is learn to read what lecturers require. And I'm sure you come through 5 years of high school, you have picked up some of these skills to learn what your teachers require of you. This is a huge skill at university. You need to start to read what lecturers require for you to be successful in this specific module that the lecturer teaches. Colleagues, and I'm through. I don't want to go through this in detail, but there are so many sections in the university where you can get support. We've got, in the faculty, often we've got support groups. We've got TUSO, which is a 24-hour crisis center at all 3 our campuses. I'm just running through. This is now Vaal campus. Potch campus, we've got student counseling and development, studentenvoorligting en ontwikkeling. If you just remember that, student counseling and development, they have a number of issues that they look at. Inter alia stress, they can help you with stress. They can help you with lots of other things also. Life skills, psychological services, career guidance, etc. And you've got a crisis line, colleagues. If you're really in deep crisis, please, as we said, go and seek help. Mafeking campus specifically also supporting. We've got a career center which is separate from the student counseling and development, which looks at careers where you can really, if you start to become stuck in what you're doing at the moment, you can get to them. We've got a disability rights unit. If you have some kind of barrier, colleagues, please connect to them from the start so that your stress is relieved. We've got a writing center. If you battle with writing, with academic writing, and academic writing is somewhat different from what you were used to at school, then you can get help at the writing center. Colleagues, thank you very much. All of the best. I hope that it's a fantastic, best time of your life, and wish you all of the best. Baie sterkte vir elkeen van u. Ek hoop dit is werklik die beste paar jaar van julle lewe.